Let's call this the yes-no decision. How do we take a person that doesn't even know about us and bring them all the way to the point where they say yes or no to client service? Let's actually start there with the NDI event. Please remember that an individual out of the blue received an email and they thought it looked interesting enough to visit our website. Because they were receiving a full scholarship, they registered, and we now have them as an attendee. We need to remember that doesn't mean they're coming. So the first thing that we need to do is, at some point, the counselor needs to call for the list of participants and people that are intending on attending the NDI event itself. And going through there and introducing yourself, letting them know how excited you are about the fact that they're going to be attending, maybe giving them a little bit of a flavor. More importantly, though, finding out what they do at their nonprofit, becoming that instant friend, exploring their pain potentially, and even asking the question, so I know that you signed up for the Major Gifts Ramp Up Conference. What were you intending on learning and what were you hoping to get out of it? Or is there a particular need that you know you're facing right now that you're hoping to be able to address by going to the Major Gifts Ramp Up Conference? I also encourage the individual, if things go swimmingly, as they should, in that first phone call to a person in a pre-event type context, Jack, this has gone so well. You want to know what? On day one, I got to have lunch. I'd love to take you to lunch on day one of the conference. That'd be Tuesday morning. Well, of course, Tuesday at noon. And just count on, I'm buying, just count on spending some time with me during the 12 o'clock hour. Okay, so what have you accomplished so far? First of all, you may have reduced attrition because a person may have been waffling as to whether or not to come, but they got a contact. You began to do research just by having a conversation with them. And by the way, in advance of that call, when you have the entire file, the list of attendees, you want to use your time wisely. There could be a small mom and pop there that doesn't even have their 501c3 yet. It's not that we're not going to serve them in some capacity or another, but as it relates to Major Gifts Ramp Up and providing that service, we probably have to have a person or an organization that has larger depth of budget. So the individuals that you call and you set up lunch appointments for, you know, it doesn't hurt to call everybody and make sure that they're there. But as it relates to setting up lunch appointments, make sure you're using your finances and your time wisely by only inviting the people to lunch during that NDI event that do have the potential, at least budget-wise, to be able to underwrite this type of service. So you've done your research, you may have sent an email, you've certainly made a phone call, you have confirmed for lunch on event day. Now, please remember that that first 2.5 hours from 9 to noon, it's exceptional. And by the time lunch comes around, you know, they're really excited. They've gone to the mountaintop. And for many individuals, even veterans, they are seeing from scratch, or A to B to Z, the way and the process whereby which we actually raise major gifts, and it's refreshing, and it is new. Certainly for the nonprofit that's is a small one, they've never seen it at all, but I still think even for the larger shop that can actually afford MGRU, they're saying, oh yeah, I remember, this does work, and maybe I should get some help to do it. So at that lunch hour, during that lunch hour, do not talk about NDI, do not talk about MGRU. What you want to talk about is, and better understand the obstacles that they're facing, the board of directors and how oriented they could be towards being involved in Major Gifts Ramp Up. You know, maybe it's the executive director you're talking to, but maybe you're not. Maybe you're talking to a director of development, and you realize that you have to get the DD, the director of development, to open up the door to you having a conversation with the executive director. Or it could be that the executive director is there, or the director of development has the executive director's confidence, and you can move towards the idea of, you want to know what, in a couple of weeks here, we're going to waive our retainer. And you're going to find more about this by the end of the event. We're going to send you a letter by the end of business tomorrow that overviews the nonprofit development inventory process. That's our 3-phase process that allows us to get really close, or much closer, to a prospect and share with them the information that they need to make a decision about taking the next step with Major Gifts Ramp Up. So you may begin talking about the nonprofit development inventory process at that lunch. Or it could be that things are going so well at lunch, or that you learned about another prospect at your NDI event. And we always talk about what we call White Tuesday. White Tuesday is that evening moment in between the the 2 days, if you will, of the NDI event, Tuesday and Wednesdays. Tuesday night dinner, we will host prospects who have depth of budget, who seem excited, who are gregarious, who we believe have the potential to be an MGRU client. So with that being said, when you're talking about the nonprofit development inventory process, that's something that you talk about at the end, either lunch or at the end of dinner. You might invite that person that you had lunch with to dinner to meet the principals of the National Development Institute. But whether it's at lunch or at dinner, we always get them to talk about what their biggest obstacle is. At the end of that moment, we simply say this, we can help with that. And though we may ask you to cover some travel expenses, what if we brought the team in, 1 or 2 people, for a whole day and waived our retainer so there wouldn't be any risk. And we met with your decision makers and your team, and we took them through the nonprofit development inventory process. Phase 1 of that process is a written document. It's only about 11 pages, and it'll ask you questions that you have the answers to easily. It'll ask you some questions that you don't have any answers to, and that's quite revelatory in of itself. It's fine, just to fill it out as completely as possible. What it does is it actually allows us to reproduce what you experienced this morning, that opening for the NDI. We're actually able to reproduce it for your team, in the context of who your organization is, because of this information that we get in phase 1 of the nonprofit development inventory. Phase 2, and that's written, and it occurs over a period of weeks. Phase 2 occurs on site, and that's where may ask you to cover some travel expenses, but we'll come in and we'll complete the inventory. Phase 2 is really filling in some of the blanks and the gaps that you can't do in writing, where you really need to have a conversation so we can better understand some of the nuances, the obstacles, maybe some needs that the board of directors have that we have to overcome. And then phase 3 of the nonprofit development inventory process, that occurs on that same day as phase 2. Phase 1 is written, phase 2 occurs on site in the morning, phase 3 could be at lunch or in the afternoon or evening, but that's exactly that time where you kind of reproduce Major Gifts Ramp Up, the overview that they previously experienced maybe a few weeks ago at an NDI event, and you do it for that board of directors, the decision makers. Sometimes it's the development committee, sometimes it's just 2 people, because they're empowered to execute this without having to go to the board. But because of the context of phase 1 and 2 of the nonprofit development inventory, you're able to do a formal presentation. And you do have a contract there. And at the end of that contract, you're able to share some real specifics as to how they could make a yes/no decision to move forward. You've heard me talk about White Tuesday. White Tuesday is in the middle of an NDI event. That Tuesday night, that first day, in between day 1 and 2, we have dinner in the evening. We call that White Tuesday. There is Black Tuesday. You'll recall that I've said that you do give them the week off, but you follow up on Monday and Tuesday to begin the process of getting your on-site set up, to follow up with that offer for the nonprofit development inventory process. I'm fond of saying that, boy, you've got to dig in before Black Tuesday, which is 7 days from White Tuesday. Otherwise, the leads start to go cold, or what we'd call the prospects. The further you get away from the event, the less valuable that prospect is. So don't forget White Tuesday and Black Tuesday. Okay, we've gone over the broad process, haven't we? The person has just signed up for an event, and I've broadly gone over what does it look like for you to get all the way to the on-site, so you know what bringing them to a yes/no decision looks like. Well, let's talk about some of the techniques that you use in the process. Number 1, don't talk about yourself. Explore their pain. Number 2, celebrate their tenure. Celebrate the good things that they're doing. Ask them about why they're involved. Really make it others oriented. Now, you've had the NDI event. Remember, they've gotten a letter that puts in writing the 3 phases of the nonprofit development inventory. Phase 1 is the written portion. Phase 2 is the on-site completion of the written portion. And phase 3 is the actual presentation to the decision makers. And we cover 4 things: income potential, capital campaign / annual fund potential, development readiness, and income stream overview. You know, we look at all the different things that we're going to recommend that they should actually implement. So, you know, I'll just sum that up again. The nonprofit development inventory process is 3 phases. Phase 1 is written. Phase 2 is the completion of the written portion while on site. Phase 3 is a presentation to the full board of directors. And then there's 4 deliverables: income potential, capital campaign / annual fund potential, development readiness, and then income stream, income thrust overview. What specifics need to be implemented? You know, the process that we've shared up to this point, particularly through the end of the NDI event, it's quite linear. An email blast goes out, people sign up, you do some research on multiple people, you follow up with them and with an individual phone call, inviting them, confirming them, affirming them, and you even know how to target them and cultivate them during the NDI event. At the end of the NDI event, they had a huge time, and they also received a letter overviewing the opportunity to go through the nonprofit development inventory process. And it's also possible that during that 2-day NDI event, you let them know that you'd be willing to come on site and waive their retainer. You may even say to them before they leave, "John, I'm going to give you a call on Monday to further explore or see when we can set up our on-site." I'm fond of saying that I have all my marketing calls set up before the NDI event is over. Now, that's not entirely true, but the person's oriented towards it. They're not hearing for it the first time on a phone call afterwards. The team itself, your NDI faculty, has overviewed that opportunity. Plus, you got to overview it specifically at lunch or at dinner or a combination of both. Or you got to do it in between breaks at the NDI event. Or you got to do it after day 1 before dinner. Or after day 2 before they departed. But what about picking up the phone? And remember, an NDI event occurs on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. I allow everybody to get back to their office. I may shoot them an email with a photograph of them from the NDI event. I may let them know that I'm going to give them a call next week. But I do let them get back to the office and take, through Friday off. But then I give them a call on Monday. Okay, here we go. Picking up the phone, setting up the appointment for the on-site. You may want to recall that that person could actually set up that on-site right there. They may have to get the chairman of a committee of the board. Or they may have to coordinate the entire event for an extra meeting of the board of directors. Or they may have to fit you into a board meeting that's coming up. Matter of fact, not too far into the conversation, when I can see that we're getting towards that moment where it's possible for an on-site marketing call, I'll ask them when their next board meeting is. And I'll have my I'll have my calendar open, and I'll be able to see if I can work that into my schedule. But remember that our object here as we're picking up the phone is to set up a date for the on-site or get to a step closer to that. What does it look like? It has nothing to do with talking about an on-site. It has nothing to do with talking about major gift ramp-up. It could be, Jack, again, you've been the Director of Development at the World Golf Hall of Fame for, if I recall, you said for 15 years. What's the biggest project that you guys are tackling right now? And he'll dive in. Or it could be because of your cultivation work that you actually did at the NDI event. You know what the project is. They're ready to do OD. They're ready to do strategic planning. They want to do a capital campaign. They don't want to do a capital campaign. They want to increase revenues for annual fund. And your response on the phone is, Jack, I was thinking over the weekend about this annual fund campaign that you're about to take on. And at that point, you need to have 3 things for Jack that he never would have thought of before. And as a consultant, you have those 3 things. You need to dig deep for them. You know, I think with my years of experience, I can almost draw on that in the moment in a broken field run, really come up with great new ideas that I can apply that they say, wow, that is a great idea. And you know, that time again on the phone as you're setting up the appointment or the call is to explore their pain, further relationship build. You know, it may be during that call that you find out how big their budget is. If I move a person towards actually having and moving us into this moment to set up the on-site, I will let them know. Now, Jack, you do understand that coming on and performing phases 1, 2, and 3 of the nonprofit development inventory process, though there's no obligation, our goal is to explore with the nonprofit, with your board of directors, or with your administration, the possibility of covenanting together beyond the nonprofit development inventory process to see if we can oversee and implement major gifts ramp up and make this campaign a success. So, you know, we're not trying to get on site to then spring it on them that we want to contract with them. We do need to qualify the prospect in advance and let them know that that's what our objective is and that we will be making a proposal during phase 3 of the nonprofit development inventory process so that they could come to a yes/no decision as to whether or not they want to move forward. So it's what I'm trying to communicate is that the call is natural because of all the pre-work that you've done, because of your own personal experience, because you know they can't wait to talk to you, because you know what your object is. You begin in celebrating the person, you begin exploring that project, they begin to say something to you about that project, you give them 1, 2, or 3 things that are, well, you know, it's gold, you're giving them platinum, and then you say, Jack, you want to know, I think we can help. And you may recall with the nonprofit development inventory process, I've actually already emailed you this morning, phase 1. It's a Word document and it's written. Phase 2 and 3 occur on the same day. So the moment is this, so Jack, when is your next board meeting? And if he says that it's 3 months from now, then you're going to want to say, well, I'll tell you what, you know, we could come on site and we could go through this nonprofit development inventory process either with the full board as directors as an extra meeting, or we could do it with just the key decision makers. Jack, it could be that you and your staff could make this decision. But basically, you do want to explore no later than 1 month or a month and a half the opportunity to come up and come on site and complete all 3 phases of the inventory process. I suppose what I'm trying to communicate is did you see how just natural this is? It ebbs and flows. It's conversational. You're being others-oriented. You're getting them to talk about themselves the whole time. You're really hearing a need that they have. You're jumping in and meeting it on the phone in a way that intrigues them. But again, you're very clear as to the opportunity. And don't run home to mama. Let them know that you will ask that travel expenses be covered because that does help qualify the prospect. You then let them know that you can either meet during the board meeting or in advance of that. And I will say that our objective is always to get to that board of directors or that committee or that executive director. Sometimes you can't get to the board of directors until you win the executive director's confidence, and the executive director was not actually at the NDI event. So there may have to be an interim meeting where, because the director of development is doing a good job, has the confidence of the executive director, the executive director takes a meeting, goes through this nonprofit development inventory process, and then says, you want to know what? I'm going to make this happen. Or, yep, let's bring you to the board meeting. Sometimes there is that interim step if the ED wasn't involved in the NDI. But at the end of the day, I wish there was a formula. I think there are some keys. The first thing is explore the project that they have the need for. The second thing is come up out of your own experience with an answer that intrigues them. The third thing is clearly make sure that they understand that on-site is with decision makers. The fourth is let them know that you will be wanting expenses to be underwritten. The fifth is you want to communicate clearly that on the other side of this, though there's no obligation, We do look forward to presenting to the decision makers the opportunity to covenant together. And sixth, really find out when it could work for you to come on site. They may be able to say yes that moment on the phone, or they may come up with a date and have to confirm with you. And if they say, you know what, I'm going to get together with my committee chair and we're going to put you on the agenda, or we need to call an extra board meeting, or I need to find out when my ED can see you, it's your responsibility as the counselor to follow up until that date's agreed upon and until you've gotten the email from them that says, let's do this thing.